The capital of the Zorian Empire stretched like a vast jewel across the horizon. Its spires reached into the sky, catching the pale light of 3 suns and scattering it across the city like 1,000 tiny stars. The air was cool and thin, filled with the faint hum of energy currents flowing through the city's veins. In this world, everything had a purpose. Every citizen moved in precise patterns, every building followed strict symmetry, and every law was obeyed without question. At the heart of this city sat the palace of the alien queen, ruler of the Zorian people. She was as beautiful as she was feared, a creature of grace and authority. Her eyes glowed softly in the dim light, reflecting wisdom beyond her years. Her people revered her, not only for her intelligence, but also for her unshakable dedication to the law. Among the Zorians, one law stood above all others. Love was forbidden. To fall in love was to weaken oneself, and weakness was unacceptable in a society built on discipline. The queen moved through her palace with the elegance of a predator. Every step was deliberate, every gesture controlled. Her council followed her silently, aware that a single misstep could bring severe consequences. No one dared speak without her permission, and emotions were shown only when absolutely necessary. The Zorian Empire thrived because of this order, but it also lived without warmth. There was no laughter in the streets, no spontaneous celebrations, no tenderness in the hearts of its citizens. Love was a forbidden luxury, and the queen enforced that rule with unwavering determination. Yet today, something unusual stirred in her domain. Far above the city, a shuttle approached, its design unfamiliar and clumsy compared to the elegant ships of the Zorians. It moved with a slight wobble, a human flaw that would have been considered a major error by Zorian standards. Inside, a human sat, wide-eyed, marveling at the city below. His name was Elias, and he had been sent from Earth as a diplomat, a representative of humanity. Unlike the Zorians, humans were unpredictable. They acted on curiosity, emotion, and instinct. Elias was no exception. As the shuttle landed in the designated area, Zorian guards scanned him with cautious eyes. They were trained to detect threats, and humans were considered unpredictable at best, dangerous at worst. Elias stepped out carefully, bowing in the formal greeting of respect, though it was clumsy compared to the precise gestures of the Zorians. He looked around, taking in the alien architecture, the flowing energy bridges, and the towering spires. There was awe in his eyes, a simple human emotion that the Zorians found strange. The queen observed him from her balcony. At first, she felt only curiosity. Many species had visited her empire, but humans were rare. What caught her attention was not his appearance. Humans were fragile, weak in comparison, but the spark in his eyes, the way he seemed alive in a way her people no longer were. There was a subtle courage in him, a willingness to explore, to question, to notice what others ignored. That spark made her uneasy. Elias was escorted through the palace halls, which gleamed like polished crystal. The walls were adorned with holographic displays of Zorian history, their great victories, and the laws that governed their society. Every step he took was measured, every sound amplified in the vast corridors. He could feel the weight of tradition pressing on him, and yet he moved with quiet confidence, nodding respectfully, but not letting fear dominate his expression. The queen decided to meet him personally. She entered the grand chamber where he was waiting, her presence commanding silence. The room fell still. Even the faint hum of energy seemed to pause. She stopped a few meters away, studying him. Elias met her gaze, not with fear, but with calm curiosity. "You are human," she said, her voice smooth and cold, yet carrying a hint of interest. "Your kind is rare here. Tell me why you have come to my empire." Elias bowed slightly. Your Highness, I come as a representative of Earth. We wish to establish communication and mutual understanding between our species. The Queen raised an eyebrow. Communication is easy. Mutual understanding is much harder. Your species is emotional, unpredictable. You value what we do not. You value feelings over logic, instinct over reason. Why should I trust you? Elias smiled faintly. Because even in a world of rules, understanding can bring more strength than blind obedience. Sometimes rules alone cannot save a people. They can only guide them. It is the choices we make, our courage, our care, that shape the future. The Queen paused. His words were simple, yet they carried weight. No visitor had ever spoken to her like this. In Zorian culture, diplomacy was a game of strategy, of measured words and hidden meaning. But Elias spoke honestly, directly, with a confidence that unsettled her. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she studied him, watching the subtle ways he moved, the way his eyes reflected curiosity and determination. Over the following days, Elias toured the city under strict supervision. Everywhere he went, the Zorians observed him closely. He interacted with their technology, their workers, and their scholars. He asked questions about the laws, the customs, the history. He was polite, but not submissive. He treated their society with respect, but he also did not hide his humanity. One afternoon, a minor accident occurred in the city's energy core. A conduit overheated, threatening to cause an explosion. Zorian workers froze, unsure how to respond without causing further damage. Elias, without thinking, stepped forward. He assessed the situation with a combination of intuition and careful observation. He instructed the workers calmly, helping them redirect energy flows safely. In the end, the danger passed with minimal damage, and several lives were saved. The Queen was present during the incident. She observed silently from a distance, her eyes narrowing as she watched Elias act. Her people had long relied on precise calculations and strict procedures to prevent accidents. Human instinct, in contrast, was messy and unpredictable, but in this case, it had worked. The human had solved the problem where her laws and protocols could not. Afterward, the Queen summoned her council. "This human," she said, her voice low but firm. "He is different. He challenges everything we hold true. I do not understand why, but he inspires more than fear or caution." A council member replied cautiously, "Your Highness, it is dangerous to allow such influence. Humans are unpredictable. Your fascination could be seen as weakness." The Queen's gaze hardened. Perhaps it is strength we have long forgotten. Observe him closely. Learn from him if you must. But do not let him disrupt the order of this empire. Yet. Meanwhile, Elias continued his exploration of the Zorian society. He observed the beauty of their cities, the efficiency of their systems, and the discipline of their people. But he also noticed the cost, the lack of laughter, the absence of personal connection, the empty expressions that betrayed a life without warmth. He wondered silently what it must feel like to live in a world where love was forbidden. One evening, he found himself in the palace gardens, a rare place of calm within the rigid walls. The plants were bioluminescent, glowing softly under the light of the alien moons. He walked among them, thinking about the Queen and her people. He understood the danger of defying the laws of an empire, but he also sensed the loneliness that hid behind their perfection. The Queen appeared silently at the edge of the garden. She did not speak at first, simply observing him. Elias turned to her and smiled politely. "It is beautiful here," he said. "Even in a city of rules, life finds a way to flourish." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You see beauty where none should exist. Your species is strange." "Perhaps," he replied gently, "or perhaps you have forgotten how to see it." For a moment, The queen felt a flicker of something she had not felt in centuries, curiosity mixed with an unfamiliar warmth. She did not answer, turning instead to gaze at the horizon. But the seed had been planted. Something about this human, his courage, his care, and his curiosity, had unsettled her. He had entered her world, and already he had begun to change it. That night, the queen could not sleep. She thought of the human, of his words, of his actions. In the silence of her chambers, she wondered what it would be like to experience the emotions her people had long banned. She felt a strange tension, one she did not understand. It was not weakness. It was awareness. Awareness of something she had thought impossible. And so, in the shining heart of the Zorian Empire, a human walked among aliens, unarmed but powerful in ways the queen could not yet measure. A spark had been lit, one that might grow into something neither of them had ever imagined. The laws of the empire were clear, and love was forbidden. But even the strongest laws could not control the stirrings of the heart, not when humanity itself had arrived. The city of the Zorian Empire gleamed beneath the light of 3 suns, but despite its beauty, there was a stillness that weighed on everything. Every citizen moved in perfect synchronization, their expressions blank, their emotions suppressed. The queen watched from her palace, observing the daily life of her people. Everything was orderly, efficient, and precise, but it lacked warmth. Elias, the human diplomat, continued his exploration of the city, escorted by the palace guards. Unlike the Zorians, he did not walk with perfect symmetry. His steps were unsteady at times, his gestures relaxed and natural. Yet there was a confidence in the way he moved, a curiosity that made the guards uneasy. Humans were unpredictable, and unpredictability in the Zorian Empire was dangerous. On this day, Elias was visiting the industrial district, where enormous machines worked tirelessly to maintain the city's energy supply. Workers in sleek uniforms moved along the conveyor systems, monitoring panels and adjusting energy flows. Their faces were calm, almost expressionless, as they carried out their duties with precision. To Elias, it looked efficient, but soulless. He approached a worker, a young Zorian named Lyra, who was struggling to stabilize a fluctuating energy core. "Excuse me," Elias said politely. "Would you like some help?" Lyra blinked, startled. Zorians were not used to unsolicited offers of assistance. I am managing," she replied cautiously. Elias knelt beside the console, studying the readouts. "I see the problem," he said softly. "You are trying to follow the manual exactly, but the energy is changing faster than the system expects. Sometimes it helps to adjust based on what you observe, not only what the instructions say." Lyra hesitated but followed his suggestion. Together they adjusted the energy flow, stabilizing the core. The danger passed, and the energy hum returned to a normal level. Lyra looked at Elias with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "How did you know?" she asked. "I'm not trained like you," Elias said with a small smile. "Sometimes humans rely on intuition as much as knowledge." Word of this incident quickly reached the queen. She observed silently from her palace balcony as Elias moved among the workers. Her heart, or what she considered her heart, felt a strange stirring. Humans were weak compared to Zorians, but this human, he had saved lives without authority, without fear. That ability to act on instinct, to inspire courage in others, was something her people had long forgotten. The queen summoned her council in a tense meeting. "This human, he is influencing my people," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "He acts without authority, yet the workers listen. This is dangerous. We cannot allow his presence to disrupt the order of the empire." A council member spoke cautiously. "Your Highness, he is just one human. Surely, he cannot change an entire society." "You underestimate him," the queen replied. "He does not follow our rules, yet he succeeds where our strict systems fail. Watch him carefully, learn from him, but do not let him change the way things are." Meanwhile, Elias continued his interactions with the Zorians. He asked questions about their history, their laws, and their culture. He did not judge their way of life, but sought to understand it. He noticed how the citizens were capable of incredible precision, but lacked creativity. They were brilliant technicians, engineers, and scholars, but they had lost something essential, something humans carried naturally: curiosity, empathy, and the courage to make personal choices. One afternoon, Elias was invited to observe a council meeting. The chamber was massive, filled with holographic displays and advisors who spoke in measured, precise tones. The queen presided at the center, her presence commanding absolute attention. As the discussion turned to new energy regulations, a minor crisis emerged. A disagreement over the placement of a new energy conduit threatened to delay construction and create tension among the districts. Elias raised his hand. "Perhaps there is another way," he said. His voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of observation rather than authority. The council turned toward him, startled. No human had ever spoken in this chamber before. The queen watched, intrigued. "Speak," she said simply. Elias proposed a solution based on collaboration. Instead of following rigid procedures or issuing commands, he suggested combining the insights of different districts, allowing workers to share observations and adjust their actions in real time. His plan was unconventional by Zorian standards, but grounded in logic and careful observation. The council hesitated. Some advisors frowned, skeptical of any method not dictated by law. Others were quietly curious, sensing the potential of his approach. Finally, the queen nodded. "Proceed," she said. The results were immediate. The energy conduit was placed successfully, without delay or error. The workers moved with renewed confidence, inspired by the humans' trust in their judgment. For the first time, the council noticed that strict rules were not the only path to success. Flexibility and human intuition could achieve remarkable results. Afterward, the queen summoned Elias privately. "You have a way of seeing what we cannot," she said. "Your species. It is strange. You are weak in many ways, yet strong in others. Your influence is growing faster than I expected." Elias smiled politely. "I do not seek to influence. I only act as any human would, by noticing what is happening and trying to help. Sometimes small changes can make a big difference." The queen studied him carefully. She had spent centuries believing that emotions and personal attachments were dangerous. Yet this human had inspired respect, loyalty, and courage, all without demanding it. Her carefully ordered world was subtly shifting, and she could not deny it. In the days that followed, Elias began to interact more with the citizens. He taught a group of young engineers how to combine creativity with precision. He spoke with scholars about ethics, leadership, and problem-solving. Everywhere he went, people responded. They laughed quietly for the first time in years, shared ideas openly, and began to question their own routines. The queen observed these changes with a mixture of fascination and unease. Part of her admired the human's courage and kindness, but another part feared the disruption he caused. If the people began to embrace human ideas too fully, the entire empire could be changed in ways she could not control. One evening, she walked through the palace gardens, where bioluminescent plants cast soft light over the paths. Elias was already there, speaking with a young Zorian girl named Lyra. She watched from a distance as he knelt to her level, listening attentively as she explained a new method for improving energy distribution. He smiled and encouraged her ideas, treating her with respect and genuine interest. The queen felt a strange sensation, something she had not experienced in centuries. It was not anger, nor fear, nor pride. It was curiosity mixed with admiration. She realized that the human's presence had opened a small door in her heart, a door she had long believed sealed. Elias noticed her presence but did not seem startled. "Your Highness," he said gently, "this garden is incredible. It shows that even in a city built on rules, life finds a way to grow." The queen did not respond immediately. She studied him silently, noting the ease with which he moved through her world, the respect he showed her people, and the warmth he inspired. "You are unusual," she finally said. "Perhaps," he replied, "or perhaps your world has simply forgotten how to see the unusual." That night the queen could not sleep. She thought of Elias, of the way he had inspired her people, and of the subtle changes she had observed. Her counsel warned her about the dangers of allowing a human to influence the empire, yet she could not ignore the truth. He was making the Zorians stronger, braver, and more alive. She began to wonder quietly, if one human could inspire such change, what could humanity achieve if given a place in her world? And more importantly, why did she feel a pull toward him, a pull she did not understand and had never allowed herself to feel? Elias, too, reflected on the day's events. He marveled at the discipline and intelligence of the Zorians, but recognized the loneliness that came with perfection. He thought of the queen, of her unwavering control and her hidden humanity, and felt a quiet hope. Perhaps, he thought, even the most rigid society could change if someone showed them a different way, a way guided not by fear or law, but by courage, empathy, and care. And so, in the heart of the Zorian Empire, life began to stir in ways no one had expected. A human had arrived, unarmed but powerful, and his presence was quietly transforming the city. The citizens laughed softly, worked with renewed creativity, and began to question their routines. The queen watched, fascinated and unsettled, realizing that the boundaries she had long enforced might not hold forever. In the silent glow of the palace gardens, she wondered if the human's influence could reach even her, that perhaps one small spark of humanity could ignite a fire in the heart of an empire that had long forgotten how to feel. For the first time in centuries, the queen faced a question she had never imagined. What does it mean to be alive, to truly connect with another being? And what role would a human play in teaching her and her people the answer? The Zorian Empire had always been a place of precision, of laws that were followed without question, and of order that no one dared disrupt. Citizens moved like pieces on a chessboard, each step deliberate, each gesture controlled. Love, in particular, was banned, seen as a distraction, a weakness, a flaw that could unravel everything. And yet the arrival of Elias, the human diplomat, had begun to quietly challenge the very foundation of their society. The queen had noticed the changes immediately. Workers were more confident. Scholars exchanged ideas with curiosity rather than strict adherence to tradition. Even her advisors, who had long maintained their roles without question, began to consider perspectives they would have once dismissed outright. And always, at the center of this subtle revolution, was Elias. He moved through the palace with ease, but also with care. Unlike the Zorians, he did not demand authority. Instead, he earned respect through action and thoughtfulness. He listened to the concerns of citizens, praised their insights, and offered gentle guidance when needed. His human nature, so different from the rigid Zorian code, was beginning to influence everyone he met. One morning, the queen observed him in the palace archives, a vast hall filled with holographic texts, data crystals, and intricate records of the empire's history. Elias was kneeling beside a young Zorian archivist named Mara, helping her organize a complex series of historical simulations. "Your method is logical," he said, "but you're missing the human element, the part that allows mistakes to become opportunities for learning." Mara looked at him, slightly confused. Human element? Elias smiled. Yes, humans see value in trial and error, in creativity, in intuition. Sometimes progress is not only in following rules, but in trusting instincts. Mara hesitated, but then tried his approach. To everyone's surprise, her work became clearer, more efficient, and more insightful than before. Even the queen, watching from a balcony above, could not hide her astonishment. The human was teaching her people something they had long thought impossible. The combination of order and emotion, logic and intuition. But Elias's influence extended beyond practical matters. He had a way of making people think about themselves, about their desires, their fears, and their choices. In private moments, citizens whispered to one another about how he had inspired them to question long-held beliefs. In the Zorian Empire, such thinking was dangerous. The queen had banned love and personal attachment for a reason. Emotions could cloud judgment, could create conflicts, could weaken the society. Yet the human had awakened something within them. The queen found herself thinking about Elias more than she expected. It was subtle at first, a fleeting curiosity, a faint interest. But as days passed, she realized that her thoughts returned to him constantly. She remembered the way he smiled at her people, the way he spoke with patience and respect, the way he moved through her palace without fear yet, with understanding. Something about him stirred feelings she had long suppressed, or perhaps never allowed herself to feel. Her council began to notice her distraction. "Your Highness," one advisor said cautiously, "the human's influence is growing. Your focus seems divided. Is it wise to allow him such freedom?" The queen's eyes narrowed. "He does not seek power," she said. "He inspires. And for the first time I see my people responding not out of fear, but out of trust. Watch him carefully, but do not underestimate him." Despite her efforts to remain composed, the queen found herself drawn to Elias. She arranged meetings under the guise of diplomatic discussion, but they often became long conversations about culture, ethics, and ideas. Elias spoke openly, sharing stories of humanity, its struggles, its triumphs, its capacity for compassion and courage. He did not lecture. He invited thought, encouraged curiosity, and inspired reflection. One evening, the queen invited Elias to walk in the palace gardens. The air was cool, and the soft glow of bioluminescent plants painted the paths in shades of green and blue. The human moved easily among the gardens, pointing out patterns in the plants, commenting on the engineering of the water streams, and quietly noting the beauty of the night sky. "You see things differently," the queen said softly, breaking the silence. Elias turned to her. "I try to notice what is around me," he replied. "Your people have built a remarkable world, but I sense something missing." "And what would that be?" she asked, her voice almost hesitant. "Connection," he said simply. "Understanding. Moments where people care not just for duty, but for each other." The queen was silent. She had never spoken of such things, even to her closest advisors. Love and attachment were forbidden because they could disrupt order. Yet listening to Elias, she realized that perhaps there was a strength in connection that she had never considered. Over the following days, the queen began to test her own boundaries. She observed Elias interacting with citizens, noting the way he encouraged creativity, celebrated small successes, and treated everyone with respect. She found herself laughing quietly at his humor, marveling at his curiosity, and feeling a warmth she could not explain. Meanwhile, Elias remained unaware of the depth of the queen's observations. To him, she was a fascinating leader, brilliant and disciplined, yet bound by rules that he could see were limiting. He admired her strength, but also sensed the loneliness that came with it. He often wondered what it would take to show her that connection, respect, and care could exist without weakening her authority. The turning point came during a council session on security protocols. A minor rebellion had begun in a remote district. The Queen's advisors pushed for strict military intervention, following precise procedures that would ensure order but risked lives. Elias suggested an alternative: communication, understanding, and strategic guidance. The council was outraged. "This is reckless," one advisor shouted. "The human has no authority here." The Queen raised her hand. "He may not have authority, but he has perspective. I will consider his plan." Elias worked with the local leaders, combining his knowledge of human diplomacy with the Zorian understanding of structure. Over several tense hours, the rebellion was resolved peacefully. Citizens returned to their duties, and the district flourished once again. The Queen observed everything, her admiration for Elias growing. He had not only solved a crisis, but had inspired her people to act bravely, with confidence, and with humanity. That night, the Queen reflected on what had happened. She had long believed that love and attachment were dangerous distractions, but Elias had shown her that connection could inspire strength, courage, and loyalty. She realized that her feelings toward him were more than mere curiosity. They were something forbidden, something she had been taught to suppress, yet could not ignore. Elias, too, sensed a subtle shift in the Queen. She asked more questions about humanity, lingered longer in conversation, and seemed to consider not just his words but his intentions and emotions. He did not speak of love directly, but he demonstrated it in small ways: respect, trust, patience, and kindness. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Elias stopped to observe a cluster of glowing flowers. "Your world is incredible," he said, "but I think it could be even more remarkable if people allowed themselves to care for each other openly." The Queen watched him, her thoughts tangled. Could she risk breaking the rules she had enforced for centuries? Could she allow herself to feel, to trust, to connect? The answer frightened her, yet also felt inevitable. The human had awakened something she could no longer ignore, a spark that challenged not only her laws but her understanding of herself. She remained silent, knowing that words could complicate what was unfolding between them. Instead, she let him speak, let him inspire, and let herself observe. The Zorian Empire was changing slowly, imperceptibly, and the human at the center of it had no idea of the power he wielded. For the first time, the Queen wondered if love, something she had long considered dangerous, might actually be a strength. If one human could awaken courage, creativity, and loyalty in her people, perhaps emotions could be allies rather than threats. And if that was true, then the human before her, Elias, was more than a diplomat. He was a teacher, a guide, and, unknowingly, a catalyst for transformation. As the stars shone above the palace, the Queen made a silent promise to herself. She would watch, learn, and protect the human's influence, but she would also prepare for the possibility that her heart, long sealed by law, might choose a path she had never imagined. For the first time in centuries, the law of forbidden love was not absolute. Something deeper, something human had entered her world, and it was changing everything. The Queen did not yet understand the full extent of what was happening. She could not predict the future, nor could she control every stir of the heart. But one truth had become clear. Elias had shown her a way to see the world differently, and she could no longer ignore it. A quiet revolution had begun, not in the streets or the council chambers, but in the hearts of those who dared to notice, to care, and to act. In that moment, under the glow of alien moons and the hum of the city, the Queen faced a question she had never asked herself. Could she allow herself to feel? Could she break a law she had upheld for centuries, not for rebellion, not for weakness, but for something greater? Connection, understanding, and perhaps even love. And as she pondered this, Elias smiled beside her, unaware that he had become the most important figure in the history of the Zorian Empire, not by force, not by command, but by the quiet power of humanity itself. The Zorian Empire had never faced such a challenge. A rebellion had begun in a distant sector of the city, fueled not by hatred, but by frustration. Citizens who had long followed strict rules without question had begun to act on instinct, questioning authority and taking risks. The rebellion was small but dangerous. It threatened to disrupt the entire energy grid that powered the capital. The queen stood on her palace balcony, overlooking the city with cold calculation. The three suns were setting, casting long shadows across the spires. Her advisors had already presented a plan: deploy the military, enforce strict curfews, and crush the rebellion before it spread. It was the Zorian way: precise, decisive, and effective. But the queen hesitated. She had learned from Elias that strength could take forms beyond control, that courage and collaboration could solve problems in ways brute force could not. Elias stood beside her, observing the city below. "It doesn't have to end in destruction," he said quietly. "There's a way to guide them without fear." The queen looked at him sharply. "And what would that be?" she asked. Elias gestured toward the city. "We can talk to them. We can show that we understand why they are frustrated. We can give them the tools to solve the problem themselves rather than forcing obedience. They already want to do the right thing. They just need guidance." Her advisors muttered in protest. "Your Highness," one said, "this is reckless. The human has no experience in leading armies or enforcing law. His plan could fail and cost lives." The queen held up a hand, silencing them. She considered Elias's words carefully. She had studied him for weeks, watched him inspire citizens, save lives, and create solutions where Zorian rules had failed. His methods were unconventional, but they worked. And now, the stakes were higher than ever. "Very well," she said finally. "We will try your way, but we act carefully. One mistake, and the consequences will be severe." Elias nodded. He wasted no time. He moved quickly through the city, accompanied by a group of trusted Zorian officers. Together they approached the districts affected by the rebellion. The citizens were tense, unsure whether to respond to orders or to act independently. Elias spoke to them directly, calmly explaining the situation and acknowledging their frustration. He did not lecture or command. He listened, encouraged dialogue, and proposed a plan where everyone could contribute. The results were immediate. Citizens who had been ready to resist suddenly felt empowered to act. They organized themselves to repair damaged energy conduits, stabilize the city's power supply, and maintain communication across districts. Elias guided them, offering suggestions but never taking control. The queen watched from above, astonished at how quickly her people responded, not out of fear but out of trust and confidence. Despite the success, the situation was not without danger. Some citizens resisted, angry at the deviation from strict rules. Tensions rose, and a small explosion occurred in one energy hub. Alarms blared, and the hum of the city faltered. Elias rushed to the site, assessing the situation with a combination of human intuition and Zorian technical knowledge. He worked with the local engineers, calmly directing them to stabilize the core. His presence inspired courage. Even those most fearful followed his guidance. Minutes passed like hours, but eventually the hub was secure. The city's energy returned to normal, and the rebellion was effectively neutralized without bloodshed. The queen descended to the city center later that evening. She walked through the streets, witnessing the aftermath of the crisis. Citizens were exhausted, but relieved. Their respect for Elias had grown, and many glanced at the queen with newfound appreciation for her willingness to consider alternatives to strict enforcement. She found Elias standing quietly near a repaired conduit, speaking with a group of young Zorians about improving energy efficiency. He looked up as she approached, smiling politely. "You did well," the queen said softly. Elias shook his head. "We did well," he corrected. "Your people worked hard, and they trusted guidance instead of fear. That is what made this succeed." The queen considered his words. She realized that Elias had not only solved the immediate crisis, but had also taught her people something far more valuable: the power of trust, collaboration, and courage. Her empire had survived because of a human, a species considered fragile and unpredictable. But the success brought a new challenge, one the queen had not anticipated. She had followed the laws for centuries, suppressing emotions and forbidding attachment. Now she found herself drawn to Elias, not only for his brilliance, but for the humanity he had shown. Her heart, a word she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge, stirred in ways she could not control. That night, in the quiet of her chambers, the queen reflected on her feelings. She had always believed that love was dangerous, that attachment could weaken even the strongest leader. And yet, she could not deny the warmth she felt toward Elias, the admiration, the respect, and something deeper she had never experienced. Meanwhile, Elias was unaware of the full weight of her attention. He continued to work, to teach, and to guide, focusing on practical solutions rather than personal connections. Yet he noticed small changes in the queen's behavior. The way she lingered near him during discussions, the rare moments of laughter she allowed herself, the thoughtful glances she cast his way. A week later, a final test of their collaboration emerged. A malfunction in the city's main energy grid threatened to shut down the entire capital. The failure was sudden, and the potential damage was catastrophic. The queen's advisors urged immediate military intervention, but the queen hesitated. She thought of Elias's methods, of the success they had already achieved, and made a bold choice. "We follow the human's plan," she announced. "He will lead the response." Elias was startled but honored. He moved quickly, coordinating teams of engineers, Zorian officials, and volunteers. He assessed the grid, identified critical failures, and proposed repairs based on observation and intuition. Citizens followed his guidance, inspired by his calm confidence. The queen observed from a command balcony, her heart pounding. She realized that she was no longer simply a ruler watching her empire. She was someone who trusted another being with the fate of her people. And that trust was terrifying and exhilarating. Hours passed as repairs were made. The city's energy fluctuated dangerously, but Elias remained steady, offering encouragement and solutions. At one point, a structural collapse threatened the main conduit. Without hesitation, Elias directed a team to stabilize the structure while personally assisting the workers. His courage and composure inspired the citizens, who worked together to prevent disaster. Finally, the repairs were complete. The energy grid hummed steadily once more, and the city was saved. The queen descended to the streets, where citizens cheered quietly, not for the law, but for the human who had guided them and for the leadership that had trusted him. She approached Elias, her expression unreadable. "You have done what we never thought possible," she said softly. "You have saved the city, and you have shown my people a way to act without fear." Elias bowed slightly. "We did it together," he replied. "Your people had the courage all along. They just needed guidance." The queen studied him. She realized that her admiration for him had grown into something far more personal. The law forbidding love suddenly felt fragile, almost irrelevant in comparison to what she now understood. Connection, trust, and shared courage could be more powerful than any rule. She faced a decision she had never imagined. She could follow the laws, suppress her feelings, and maintain order. Or she could allow herself to act on the emotions that Elias had awakened, risking her authority, her reputation, and the very structure of her empire. The choice was not easy. She knew the council would resist, the citizens might question her judgment, and the laws she had enforced for centuries would be broken. Yet, she could not deny the truth. Elias had changed her perspective, her people, and even herself. In that quiet moment, under the glow of alien moons and the hum of a city restored, the queen made her decision. She would trust the human. She would act on instinct, even if it defied centuries of law, and she would embrace the possibility that love, or something like it, was not weakness, but strength. The queen turned to Elias, her voice steady but soft. "Tomorrow, we will address the council. You will stand beside me, not as a human diplomat, but as someone I trust with the future of this empire." Elias blinked in surprise, but nodded. "It would be my honor," he said. That night, as the city settled into quiet, the queen reflected on what had happened. A rebellion had tested her people, and a human had guided them to victory. But the greatest change was within herself. She had learned to trust, to observe, and to value courage, compassion, and connection above rigid rules. And she knew that tomorrow, when the council assembled and the laws were discussed, her choice would mark the beginning of a new era, an era where the influence of humanity and the strength of the heart could reshape the Zorian Empire forever. The human had shown her what was possible. Now she was ready to act on it, whatever the consequences. The palace of the Zorian Empire was alive with tension and anticipation. The council had assembled in the grand chamber, their expressions formal but wary. Every advisor knew the purpose of this gathering. The queen was about to speak, and change hung in the air like a delicate thread. Citizens watched from the streets outside through the transparent energy shields, aware that the fate of their laws, and perhaps their society itself, was about to be revealed. Elias stood beside the queen, calm yet alert. He had no desire for power or recognition, only a wish to help and guide. Still, he understood the significance of this moment. The queen's decision to trust him, to value his perspective over rigid precedent, had already transformed the city. Now, it was time for the empire to witness it. The queen rose from her seat, her posture perfect, yet there was a warmth in her eyes that had never been there before. The council fell silent. She took a deep breath, and her voice echoed through the chamber, steady and commanding. "For centuries," she began, "we have followed the law without question. Love and attachment have been forbidden, considered dangerous distractions. We believed that emotion weakens strength, that connection creates vulnerability. We were wrong." A murmur ran through the council. Advisors exchanged worried glances, unsure of where this declaration would lead. Some had long suspected the queen's fascination with the human diplomat, but no one had dared imagine such a public acknowledgement. Elias remained silent, standing respectfully beside her. He did not speak because he did not need to. His presence alone symbolized what the queen had already learned. Strength is not only in law and order, but also in courage, empathy, and connection. The queen continued, her voice firm but gentle. "This human, Elias, has shown us a different way. Through his actions, he has taught us that courage can come from trust. Wisdom can come from listening, and strength can come from the heart. He has saved our city, guided our citizens, and inspired hope where fear once ruled." She paused, letting her words sink in. The council was silent, some visibly struggling with the weight of her declaration. Then she said what no one had expected, "And I have learned something from him, something I never thought possible. I have learned that connection, respect, and even love do not weaken us. They make us stronger. Therefore, I declare that the law forbidding love is hereby changed. It is no longer forbidden to feel, to care, or to trust. The chamber erupted in whispers and stunned expressions. Citizens outside gasped, unsure if they had heard correctly. A rule that had governed the empire for centuries had been overturned in a single declaration. The Queen's voice, steady and unyielding, carried across the city. From this day forward, the Zorian Empire embraces not only order and discipline, but also the courage to connect, to inspire, and to care. We recognize the strength in humanity, the power of empathy, and the value of the heart. Silence followed, heavy and profound. Then, slowly, the council members began to nod. One by one, they stepped forward, acknowledging the wisdom of her decision. Citizens outside began to cheer quietly, realizing that a new era had begun. Elias turned to the Queen, unsure what to say. He had never sought recognition or reward. Yet the Queen took his hand, a gesture of trust and connection she had never made with anyone before. "You have changed everything," she said softly. "Not only my laws, not only my people, but even me." "I cannot deny it any longer. I trust you, I value you, and I care for you." Elias looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of her words. He had admired her courage and wisdom from the beginning, but he had never expected to witness such a transformation. "Your Highness," he said gently, "you have inspired me just as much as I have inspired your people. It is an honor to stand with you." The Queen smiled, a rare and genuine expression that lit her features with warmth. In that moment, centuries of law and fear seemed to melt away, replaced by something stronger, something human. She had broken her own rule, not out of weakness, but out of courage. She had chosen connection, trust, and love over rigid control. The citizens of the Zorian Empire slowly began to show their emotions openly. Children laughed in the streets. Scholars discussed ideas freely, and workers shared small acts of kindness. The city had changed, not because of law or fear, but because one human had reminded them of the power of the heart. Elias continued to guide and support, helping the citizens implement new systems that combined discipline with creativity. The Queen, too, embraced her new role, balancing authority with compassion. Together, they demonstrated that leadership could be both strong and human. As days passed, the bond between the Queen and Elias deepened. Their conversations were no longer formal. They shared stories, ideas, and dreams. Citizens watched as their ruler, once distant and unapproachable, moved through the city with warmth and accessibility. They learned that strength and connection were not opposites, but partners in building a thriving society. One evening, the Queen and Elias walked through the palace gardens, bathed in the glow of bioluminescent plants. The city below hummed quietly, alive with energy and hope. Elias gestured toward the glowing pathways. "Your empire is beautiful," he said, "but even more remarkable now is the courage of your people. They have learned to trust, to care, and to act, and that is something no law could ever teach them." The Queen nodded, her gaze soft. "You have shown me a world I never imagined, a world where law and order coexist with empathy, where strength is measured not only by control but by the heart. You have changed everything, Elias, including me." They stood together in silence, watching the city glow under the alien moons. In that quiet moment, it was clear that the Zorian Empire had entered a new era, one inspired not by fear or strict rules, but by the influence of humanity and the courage to care. News of the change spread quickly throughout the empire. Citizens began to embrace personal connections, support one another openly, and act with courage and compassion. The Queen's decision became a symbol of hope and progress, demonstrating that even the oldest and strictest laws could be transformed by understanding and empathy. In the months that followed, Elias continued to work alongside the Queen, helping to implement reforms that encouraged creativity, collaboration, and connection. The citizens thrived, balancing discipline with freedom and efficiency with care. The Zorian Empire became stronger, not despite human influence, but because of it. And at the center of it all, the Queen and the human diplomat shared a bond that was unprecedented. It was not simply attraction or admiration. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and the courage to act in a world that had once forbidden such feelings. Together, they led the empire into a future full of hope, innovation, and humanity. The final test of their partnership came during a grand celebration in the city center. Citizens gathered to honor the Queen's decree and to recognize the human who had inspired such change. Elias stood beside the Queen as they addressed the crowd. "You have all shown courage," the Queen said. "You have embraced connection, creativity, and trust. Together we have proven that strength is not diminished by empathy but enhanced by it. Let this be the foundation of our empire, a society that values both discipline and the heart." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the city. Children laughed, scholars smiled, and citizens shared small acts of kindness. It was a moment of unity, of hope, and of celebration. Elias turned to the Queen, his eyes reflecting the joy and pride of the citizens. "You have changed everything," he said softly. "And you have taught me what it means to lead with heart," she replied. "I will never forget it." As the celebration continued, the Queen took Elias's hand, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel freely. She had broken her own law, not for rebellion, not for weakness, but for something far greater: connection, trust, and love. And in doing so, she had shown her empire and herself that the greatest strength lies in the courage to care. The city glowed beneath 3 suns, alive with energy, hope, and new beginnings. Citizens walked freely, laughed openly, and embraced one another without fear. The Zorian Empire had changed forever, not through force, but through the quiet, transformative power of humanity. And at the center of it all, the alien Queen and the human diplomat stood together, a living testament to what was possible when courage met compassion and when the heart dared to defy even the oldest laws. The future was no longer dictated by fear or rigid rules. It was defined by choice, by courage, and by the transformative power of connection. Humanity had touched the empire, and its influence would be felt for generations to come. In the glow of the palace gardens, under the alien moons, the Queen and Elias smiled at one another. Their journey was far from over, but one truth remained clear. Love, trust, and courage had won, not as a violation of law, but as a new law of life itself. And in that moment, the Zorian Empire learned a lesson that would endure forever. The heart, guided by wisdom and courage, is the strongest force of all.